Good morning and welcome to another Thursday's Thought for the Day. This morning we're going to look at quite a long passage from the book of Daniel, chapter 6. And this is a story about Daniel in the lion's den. So here goes the passage. It pleased Darius to appoint 120 satraps to rule throughout the kingdom, with 3 administrators over them, one of whom was Daniel. The satraps were made accountable to them so that the king might not suffer loss. Now Daniel so distinguished himself among the administrators and the satraps by his exceptional qualities that the king planned to set him over the whole kingdom. At this, the administrators and satraps tried to find grounds for charges against Daniel in his conduct of government affairs, but they were unable to do so. They could find no corruption in him because he was trustworthy and neither corrupt nor negligent. Finally, these men said, "We will never find any basis for charges against this man Daniel unless it has something to do with the law of his God." So these administrators and satraps went as a group to the king and said, "May King Darius live forever." The royal administrators, prefects, satraps, advisors and governors have all agreed that the king should issue an edict and enforce the decree that anyone who prays to any god or human being during the next 30 days, except to you, your majesty, shall be thrown into the lion's den. Now, your majesty, issue the decree and put it in writing so that it cannot be altered, in accordance with the law of the Medes and the Persians, which cannot be repealed. So King Darius put the decree in writing. Now when Daniel learned that the decree had been published, he went home to his upstairs room where the windows opened towards Jerusalem. 3 times a day he got down on his knees and prayed, giving thanks to his God, just as he had done before. And then these men went as a group and found Daniel praying and asking God for help. So they went to the king and spoke to him about his royal decree. "Did you not publish a decree that during the next 30 days anyone who prays to any god or human being except you, your majesty, would be thrown into the lion's den?" And the king answered, "The decree stands, in accordance with the law of the Medes and the Persians, which cannot be repealed." And then they said to the king, "Daniel, who is one of the exiles from Judah, pays no attention to you, your majesty, or to the decree you put in writing. He still prays 3 times a day." When the king heard this, he was greatly distressed. He was determined to rescue Daniel and made every effort until sundown to save him. Then the men went as a group to King Darius and said to him, "Remember, your majesty, that according to the law of the Medes and the Persians, no decree or edict that the king issues can be changed." So the king gave the order, and they brought Daniel and threw him into the lion's den. And the king said to Daniel, "May your God, whom you serve continually, rescue you." A stone was brought and placed over the mouth of the den, and the king sealed it with his own signet ring and with the rings of his nobles, so that Daniel's situation might not be changed. Then the king returned to his palace and spent the night without eating and without any entertainment being brought to him, and he could not sleep. At the first light of dawn, the king got up and hurried to the lion's den. When he came near the den, he called to Daniel in an anguished voice, "Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God, whom you serve continually, been able to rescue you from the lions?" And Daniel answered, "May the king live forever. My God sent his angel, and he shut the mouths of the lions. They have not hurt me because I was found innocent in his sight. nor have I ever done any wrong before you, your majesty." The king was overjoyed and gave orders to lift Daniel out of the den. And when Daniel was lifted from the den, no wound was found on him, because he had trusted in his God. What an amazing story this is. Now I'm just going to reflect very briefly. There are two things which strike me about this passage today. The first is that there's so much about the story and about Daniel which reminds me of Jesus. So firstly, Daniel's exceptional qualities and character. He is a man of complete honesty and integrity through and through the whole of his life. And of course, Jesus was a man of complete integrity and a man of no sin. The other administrators were jealous of Daniel's position, and they were desperate to find grounds to charge against him. But because they found no fault in Daniel at all, they needed to use deceit and manipulation. They needed to work in a really underhand way to accuse Daniel of anything. And of course, this reminds us of Jesus and of the Pharisees, how they found no fault in Jesus but had to work in a really underhand way to eventually bring his arrest. In the lion's den, angels came to protect Daniel from death and from the lions. And if we think back to the wilderness, when Jesus was in the wilderness after his baptism, he was out there with wild animals. And then when the devil finally left him, angels came and ministered to Jesus. And then, of course, God delivers Daniel from the mouths of these from the mouths of these lions. And similarly, well, more spectacularly, of course, Jesus completely overcomes the powers of death through his miraculous resurrection. So that's the first thing, the things which remind me of Jesus in this passage. And secondly, I just wanted to comment on Daniel's amazingly solid prayer life, which sustains him. So it's thought that Daniel was an elderly man in this passage, perhaps in his 70s or even his 80s. He is somebody who has had a lifelong habit of prayer. And this prayer life, his habit of prayer life, has completely rooted and grounded everything about who Daniel is, how he behaves, what he says, what he does. His prayer life is deeply ingrained in his body. Daniel would regularly give thanks to God and ask for his help and guidance and direction, and he trusted God. Daniel probably prayed on and off constantly through the day, but he had these 3 formal times of prayer when he would get down on his knees and pray to God. Daniel was one of the top 3 administrators for King Darius, so undoubtedly his life was extremely busy. But despite that busyness, prayer for Daniel was central, it was foundational to everything about his life. It was a top priority for him. So what a great reminder this passage is to all of us, especially at this time. What a great reminder to all of us that prayer, the importance of prayer, to be foundational in our lives and to be the rock which keeps our lives solid in God. Have a great day.